Hello, everyone. As I mentioned before, my name is Janine. I am the events programming manager at Meetup. I am so excited for this event today. As most of you may know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we could not end the month without having an event where we get to celebrate these two fabulous organizers who lead groups for support and mental health. These organizers that you're going to meet in a little bit have created spaces for their members to open up, to get support, and most importantly, to heal. You'll be meeting them shortly. Lara Novack, organizer of Narcissistic Abuse Recovery Support Group, Thrive Bay Area, and Sandy Shehadeh, I said it right, Sandy, organizer of Depression and Bipolar Support. And they are going to share how they've changed lives while leading their respective groups, as well as how their lives have changed. And I just want to do a content warning. We might talk about some topics that might trigger difficult feelings. But before we get started, I would like to go over some of our guidelines. This event is being recorded. Don't worry, you will not appear in video. The only three people that will are Sandy, Lara, and myself. But if folks happen to join late, or if you want to watch a recap, you'll be able to do so on our blog, meetup.com/blog. Everyone is muted. No, your mute button is not broken. That's just a courtesy. Also, we encourage you to ask questions. We love to hear from you. We want to answer your questions, so please do submit them in the Q&A. In the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And lastly, we have closed captioning thanks to Zoom and its features. You can turn it on. If you hover on the right side of your screen, you'll see a button that says live transcription. Just hover over that button and you can select your preferences. So I gave a little overview of what the event is going to be about today, and I introduced myself. I'm going to introduce the panelists shortly, and then we're going to get into our discussion. After our discussion, I'm going to take questions from all of you. So again, please do submit your questions, and I'm going to ask Lara and Sandy your questions. All righty, let's get started. So before I dive into the questions and we get to know our panelists, I'm going to do a brief introduction to both. Lara Novack is a licensed educator serving as an administrator in an elementary school. Yes, you heard that correctly, I know. She is trained as a cognitive coach and spent 9 years coaching in school. Surviving an unconventional childhood where she learned to exist by suppressing her own needs, Lara decided to become a teacher at age 9 in order to advocate for those who didn't have a voice. She advocated for students for 2 decades, while Lara found herself in personal and professional relationships, where she continued on the path of hiding her own voice, needs, and wants. While she was making a difference for others, she only came into her own at 40. Lara, I am on the same boat. It wasn't until I turned 40 when she began investing in herself and discovering the why behind her relationships. As a 40-year survivor and 5-year thriver, Lara is honored to be the organizer of a community of those who are breaking the cycle and going beyond narcissistic abuse to lead healthy and happy lives. So beautiful. And Sandy Shehadeh, did I say it right? Yay! Yep. Has been an active member of Depression Bipolar Support Alliance since 2009. She became a DBSA Meetup organizer in 2011 and a DBSA NCA board member in 2013, and was a volunteer mental health advocate with NAMI. Sandy has been a Peace Corps volunteer, medical missionary, massage therapist, physical therapist, and a life coach. Oh, you both have much more in common. She has contributed to TheMighty and is currently writing a book which she hopes to publish soon. She lives in Maryland with her husband and cat. Please do let us know when you publish your book, because we'd love to have you to talk about your book. So welcome both. Thank you so much for being a part of today's panel. On Meetup, when you joined Meetup, being an organizer and organizer, I always
I was a massage therapist too for 7 years. Amazing how we need certain aspects, right, in our healing journey. So I joined Meetup. I actually checked my registration status a long time ago, but I was not active until I met up with the originator of the Meetup I now organize in 2019-20. And Amelia Notch, who started the meetups in California for narcissistic abuse recovery. She ran and nurtured them for 6 years and then moved overseas and asked if I would step up as the organizer. So I became active just last summer in running the meetings for her as she was transitioning, and then stepped up as organizer in the fall. So it's been a very busy year this year with Meetup, and I love being a part of that community.
Well, we love having you. So thank you for being an organizer on Meetup. Sandy.
I found Meetup in 2009 when I was looking for a support group after a mental health crisis. And our original organizer stepped down after he moved to Florida. And then someone else stepped up, and then they left. And then so I stepped up. So I started organizing after that in 2012.
So you both started off as members of the groups, and then you stepped up and became organizers. I love the leadership. So now that we know why you're on Meetup and why you stepped up to be the organizer of these groups, can you tell us a little bit about your group? Some of the events that you have, tell us about the members. Is the group inclusive or exclusive? We'd love to hear about it. Should I do alphabetical order again, or should I pass it on to Sandy? Sandy, go ahead.
So our group is DBSA NCA, which is DBSA National Capital Area, and we're a chapter of DBSA National, which is DBSAalliance.org. And we have weekly and biweekly peer support group meetings for people with depression and bipolar. And you don't need to be formally diagnosed. It's just if you self-identify as having depression or bipolar. We also have a bi-weekly meeting for friends and family who are caregivers or who just want to give support. We have a new peer group meeting for women. And we also have speaker events where we have psychiatrists and therapists come and talk about the latest research and treatment. And we have in person, when we could meet in person, we had dinners and social events and outings and sightseeings. And now online we have open mics and social events.
I love it. It's just such a great community, and just having all these events and all the support for everyone to just connect and be together. Lara, how about you?
Yeah, so there's actually 3 cities, 3 different meetups, one based in the Bay Area, one in San Diego, and one in LA. And I feed them, while I advertise in all 3, I feed them all into the same events. And we pretty much are virtual, especially because I live in Virginia. But our meetups support people who are leaving toxic or building the courage to leave toxic relationships, specifically from narcissistic abuse. And there's a pretty wide definition of what people define as narcissists. So we don't require any kind of diagnoses either for people to join. We currently, the group for years functioned with 1 meeting a month. And when I stepped up, I surveyed the entire community and sought their feedback as to what they wanted. And so from their feedback, we now have our monthly meeting that overviews recovery. Every other week, we have a less formal meetup. So last night was our Wednesday. It's called Stop and Swap, Socializing with a Purpose. So people come and I pose questions and then break them up into small groups, and they're socializing to build their community and gain knowledge. And then I also offer on a sporadic basis seminars like Rebuilding Confidence or Narcissism 101, understanding the stages of a relationship so you can identify when they're healthy or not. And so that's ever evolving. And as I tell my members, I'm always open to feedback. The group wouldn't exist without them. And so the group needs to meet their needs.
Lara, I have a question for you. So in your group, do you have you have narcissistic abuse survivors, but you also have members that define themselves as or identify as narcissists?
So it's sort of a loaded question because we all have, if we're healthy, we all have narcissistic traits. As long as those traits are imbalanced with our empathic traits, we're a healthy person. And so it's really important in the group for our members to feel safe, and people who have strong narcissistic traits would not make them feel safe. So I did have one request from somebody who was looking to overcome what they felt was narcissism, and I explained why we wouldn't be the best fit for them and wish them well.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that.
I do want to tell you, we're headed into dismissal. This is real life. I am in school, so I'm going to mute as much as I can so you don't get distracted by that.
Thank you. So we learned a little bit about why you became an organizer and about your group. I want to move on now to the kind of environment that you have created in your group, right? You've created, like, as we mentioned, like safer spaces for these members to come, you know, where they can be vulnerable. They trust you to share, you know, what their experience is, and they feel supported. And, you know, because of this support, they can then heal. You know, how have you created this environment?
You want me to take this one first?
Sure.
Okay, so I do have basic questions for people who are interested in membership, and I take the questions really seriously. And much like an experience in a narcissistic relationship, I say to people, we're not all in the same boat. We're all in the same storm, but we have our individual boats. I feel that way about the answers that people give me. There's always a similar feel to the answers of people who are in recovery, and so it stands out when somebody doesn't respond in that same venue. And also if they're not really committed to the healing process, I want to make sure that our time together is spent moving forward and healing. And so if somebody's really not committed to healing, they're sort of wishy-washy about it. Again, I explain that they might need to take a different path and come back to us. So that's the first way, is I try to make sure that we're inviting in people who are of that healthy mindset or wanting to get healthy mindset. We have group agreements. That was a recent addition people had asked for. And so we set a standard of being open-minded, of being critical consumers, and knowing that anything that's offered has to be researched to see if it's a fit for each one of us. We have a sharing policy that it's not mandatory and no one's going to be pressured to share. And then when I do our breakout sessions, I always break out our group members into groups of 3. So you're never one-on-one. You always have a third view. So if something did come up, there would be 3 lenses in order to make sure we were making the right accommodations moving forward to ensure safety.
Thank you. Sandy.
Yeah, thanks. Along the same lines, our meetings always start with their DBSA guidelines being read. And those are guidelines that talk about in confidentiality and talk about respect and equality and one person speaking at a time. And so those are set at the very beginning so that there's an expectation of what each meeting will have. And we also encourage trigger content warnings in the beginning of a share. And we don't allow any specific talk about suicide or details about attempts or anything like that. Our meetup group is private so that people can't kind of just go online and search and see, oh, I wonder if this person is in the meetup or not, and find out who's a member that way. During our meetings, just like what Lara said, our meetings are sharing optional, so you can pass and not share at all, and you're in full control about what you do share about yourself.
You know, we talked about one of the things that you do in your group is that you help members feel supported, and that is so important, right? Like, it's so hard to find that right support. I know that I've struggled, as I've mentioned to both of you. I'm someone that has depression and anxiety, and I've struggled to find that right support. And I have to say, I'm so lucky and so fortunate that, you know, I kind of have the people in my life that are super supportive. And I also work at a company at Meetup that is very supportive, and I can be myself, and I can tell someone, especially my manager, you know, I'm really off today. I'm not feeling right. You know, I need some time off. And they're all very understanding, and my team just wants to jump in and help. Like, how do you provide that support for someone? What are some ways that you can support, you know, that you support your members, or that you support your friends? Either.
So I think that, you know, really listening and witnessing is just a huge way to support other people. Where when we're present and we're listening fully and in what someone is sharing with us, it's very supportive.
Lara, do you want to add anything to that?
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think leaving judgment at the door, right, of what other people's experiences have. And I think language is incredibly important in how we frame things. And so I'm very transparent with people that things like feeling ashamed or feeling shame is a way to keep people in their shells, and it's a safe space for them to say things they may feel ashamed about, because that's actually what will break the cycle. That when we get shamed, shame creates silence, and silence breeds more shame. So I try to impart these ideas that are research based to the members, because each one of our members is really truly trying not just to lead a healthy life, but to break a cycle. And typically, it's a generational cycle of multiple generations. And so making sure that they understand that their experiences are not who they are. They're just situations they've been through, and that they are among very good company. Like I said before, we're not all in the same boat, but many of us have been through very similar experiences. And I think as my members share, they see a lot of head nods and a lot of smiles. And so they gain momentum in sharing and healing when they are able to take that initial step forward and have a small vulnerable risk to share.
Thank you. Something that I want to touch on, Lara, is you talked about language, right? Language is very important, and that's something that I personally struggle with. I don't know whether it's right to say mental health or mental illness. You know, what is the right way? And this isn't part of the questions. I'm just like, I want to understand this, because I don't like saying mental illness. Like, when I say mental illness, it sounds like there's something wrong with you, right? Like all of you, and there really isn't, right? It's just like, you know, there's a part of you that needs more care, right? That needs a lot of TLC and a lot of care from you. It isn't that there's something wrong with you. So what is the right way? Like, what are the right terms, or what's the right way, you know, the right terminology or the right language?
You know, I'm not sure that there is right or wrong in the field. I've worked in special education for years and years and years, and we use terms like disability, and I think of my students as differently abled, right? And so for me, coming from a place of positive intention and positive presuppositions, so when we talk about a body that needs to that's getting in shape, or, you know, using practices to get in shape, we talk about physical health. When we talk about a mind that's using practices to get into shape, I think about it as mental health. And so sometimes we make choices or are in experiences that might shake up our mental health, and we've got to go back to those practices that keep us healthy. So for me, I just always, and I'm not always great, I call myself out when I use terms that I feel don't promote that lens, because it happens to all of us. We all err. I think the more we come from a place of growth mindset, the better off we are.
Perfect. Sandy?
I think it's really important not to over-identify with a diagnosis. You know, that the diagnosis is a part of who we are. It may shape some of our behaviors and our emotions and our feelings, but it's not all of who we are, you know. And so to be constantly saying, I am bipolar, or I am depressed all the time, And to say that language over and over again reinforces something that we don't necessarily want to be focusing on, when our identity is so much more than that. You know?
I love that. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I want to hear some, I mean, you obviously, you're both so committed to your groups. You put so much into your groups and your members. Are there any stories, you know, any memorable stories or success stories that stick out from your group that you can share? Sandy, you're unmuted, so I'll go with you. And I mean, I know, Lara, I know why you're muted, but.
So, you know, during each meeting, I think the small successes in that it might be the first time someone's ever shared about their story. It might be the first time they've ever shared these feelings and thoughts out loud to anybody else. So that's a success story in just being authentic, you know, and we all celebrate each other's life changes. We were talking about how, you know, each birthday alive is a birthday that we might not have had, right? So just staying alive is something to celebrate too. And then the story that came to mind was that we were supporting someone in an ER in a mental health crisis, and then also later on celebrating their engagement, their relationship with another person, you know, so celebrating the journey from being in crisis to getting a new job, having a promotion, graduating, having a marriage, having babies, you know, all those things we celebrate.
It sounds like your group is much more like you're becoming each other's lifelines, right? It's like you're each other's tribe, you know, because when we talked about this earlier for support, and like I said, like, you know, I'm lucky to have people, I'm lucky that Meetup fosters, you know, that kind of environment. But it's also, you know, throughout the years, I've lost friends because they didn't really know how to support me when I needed that support. But because of that, you know, there's also been friends that I've stuck through it with me, and I now know like who my tribe is, right? So it's like I know now when I'm going through it, when I'm having an episode, I know who is going to be the one that's going to come to my house, pull me out of bed if I need to be pulled out of bed, you know, and take me out, or it's going to bring me ice cream or whatever it is, you know, like, and it's taken time to figure that out. But when you have those people that do that, it makes such a difference. Sorry, Lara, I started talking. You can go.
No, I agree completely. And I think, you know, different people serve different roles in our lives. Not everyone's purpose in our life is to be our lifeline in this area. And so we talk about the importance of having a community who understands and validates. And so we talk about the fact that you could have a friend community, you could have a religious community, you could have a work community, but this community that we have through Meetup really are the people who can understand and validate because they've been through it. A lot of my members say things like, so you're never going to believe this. And I always say to them, there's pretty much nothing you could say I wouldn't believe, because I walked through my life thinking like, who would believe this? If this were a movie, people would go, that never happened. And there I was walking through it. So I think it's really important, right, to have those communities. When I think about successes, right from the get-go, every membership request I have is a success, because that means somebody's taken a step in awareness and self-advocacy and self-help. So I always say, like, I show up 100%, no matter what the outcome is, right? I put up an event, and a lot of the time, somewhere between 30 and 60 people show up. It's like I have my own party. And there, as I was trying to figure out what the group needed, I launched a variety of different kinds of events. And one event, I had a trivia night, and I showed up 100%. And after about 25 minutes, there was nobody in attendance. And so I thought, okay, like, this wasn't what they were looking for. This isn't what they meant by informal. I was just about to shut it down, and a member showed up, and he was about to celebrate his 50th birthday. He was recovering from cancer. He was reeling from 2 discards from 2 different narcissistic relationships. And we got to have this intense conversation that ultimately ended, or started with him feeling pretty depressed, and ended with him agreeing that even in COVID, he could have a Zoom party. Didn't have to be huge, but we could name 3 to 5 people that he wanted to celebrate himself with. And that to me, whether there were 30 people at my trivia or one person and we didn't do trivia, every interaction is an amazing success. And he's up and back because the journey is not a straight line. So I saw him this week, and for a while he was really in a good place. And so yesterday we talked about reframing the critical things we say about ourselves. And he was like, I can't believe I got sucked in again. And I was like, what if it wasn't you got sucked in again? What if it was because of who you are, you're always going to try to make lemonade out of lemons? Unfortunately, these were rotten lemons, and it doesn't matter how much sugar you put in, it's never going to be lemonade. Right. And so that idea of reframing things, and just being kind, being there, showing up, I think all of that is equal success.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, so we talked about successes, right? And some great memorable stories. How about some challenges, that you've shared, that you've experienced with your group, and how have you been able to overcome them? Lara, do you want to go?
Sure. My biggest challenge is technology. And that, during the day, I had like my professional development platforms. My students were all virtual. We had a different platform for that. And then I would host my meetups on Zoom. And so it was constantly like, how do I share my screen? How do I do this? How do I do that? And thankfully, because I'm part of the community and not just the organizer, right? I am not the leader. I just happen to post the events. I'm transparent, and I tell my members, right? Like, I need your help. I started this meetup and there's no breakout rooms, and these things come up. And I think for people to see that the leader, right, the organizer of the event has struggles and troubles too, is helpful for them. I would say the other big challenge for me was the first time and each time I have to decline somebody, because I always worry, like, what if they do really need this group? But I always try to weigh the good of the group against the individual needs. But it does break my heart, because I do worry about each person.
Thank you. And just, technology doesn't really count. We all have that. I mean, it's what happens after you turn 40. Sandy.
I'll think harder.
So our challenges come when people come to the group with an agenda. So some come to push their own advice, their own cures, or to sell a cure. We know what's best for you to fix your depression or bipolar, and or if they come to try and find someone for a romantic relationship, which is just never a good idea, not at all, especially in a mental health group. So, and with all communities, sometimes people push each other's buttons and have communications issues and may cross some personal boundaries, but that usually is overcome by just talking it through with people, and by time, and occasionally we've had to ban people too.
Thank you. Okay. So what have you learned about yourself, being the organizer to your groups?
Sandy, you go first.
Oh. We both had the same idea.
So I mentioned this before, listening is the best way to support somebody. Just being a witness, being present with them is just the best way to support somebody. In the past, I always want to fix things. I want to fix things and support people and help people feel better, but listening is really the best way for me to support somebody else. And the other thing is, I was always having difficulty asking for my own emotional support, asking for help. But I've learned that people don't know. They have no idea when and how to give support unless I tell them. So.
We talked about this yesterday, Sandy, how that is such a big thing, right? Because I was saying for me, it's like twofold, because I'm just like so independent that I don't like asking for help in the first place, right? Like I'm very independent and very stubborn. And then, when it comes time, when I am not feeling well, and asking for help is one of the hardest things for me to do. And there's always that shame and like, well, what are you going to ask for? What are you going to tell them? Right? It's just so difficult. Lara.
I would say, a big thing that I've learned is you don't have to know everything, right? What I just shared, you don't have to know everything to be the organizer. My life mentor always says, if you know A, B, and C, you're obliged to teach A and B, right? And keep learning. So as long as I can put some information out there, I invite the group to share, to offer resources, to connect around their personal stories. And so I actually think it's a relief. Sometimes people will say like, well, you might know more about this. And I was like, not at all, right? Like sometimes it's like a big relief to be like, yep, I put up the event and you guys have a lot of really good information to share too. And then I would say for me, I mean, as you heard in my bio, right? Like I became a teacher at 9 because I had an unconventional childhood and there were not teachers to advocate for me. And at 9, I was like, God, if this is the smartest adults are, I have to be a smarter adult for children who need them. And so I did. I became an educator and I've always served populations of need. So I really used my life. When I realized I was in a narcissistic relationship in my marriage, I kept coming back to beating myself up of like, how could I have chosen this? How could I have done this? And by being the organizer of the meetups, I am now using my life. And so I get to have a purpose from the journey I went through. I get to shine a light for others that there is a path, right? There is a path to healing, or many paths, but it gets illuminated, I think, at a time where you feel a lot of darkness, fear, and loneliness. And so for me, that's a huge part about myself that I've learned, that it's really important for me to pay it forward, and be a place where other people can go about their healing too.
I've wanted to add to that. And actually I forgot my train of thought. This is so awful. I'm like, I got stuck in like listening to what you were saying and I forgot what I wanted to say.
It's about paying it forward. That's it.
It was about paying it. Oh, here's what I was going to say to you. So I guess, how did it feel when you realized that was your purpose, right? Because so many times, and I cannot tell you how many times when I was like in the deeps of it, right? And I still didn't know how to manage my depression or my anxiety. I was so angry and like, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Like, why does this have to happen to me? So for you to get to a place where you realized, okay, it's like an aha moment, right? Like now I know why this is happening to me. Like I'm paying it forward and this is how I'm using my life story.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a value that I live with, right? That we leave this world a better place than we found it. And that's, all I can do. I can't always control the experiences I'm going through. I always reflect and think, how can I help somebody else, or how can I improve this? So if somebody else is going through something similar, they don't feel as lonely or as ashamed as I did.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions and then we have to go to Q&A. So the second to last question, was there a time when you felt that you were over your head or that you were overwhelmed? What happened? What was it like? And how did you overcome it? Lara, do you want to go?
Sure. So I shared that I had been covering for the woman who started the meetups. And so I was using 100% of her content. And when I transitioned to being the organizer, I put my own content in. And the first time I told my personal story, I was so nervous. I was not succinct and did not do a generous job of letting my members have time to talk too. And I swear to you, I was like dodging virtual figurative tomatoes. Like, people were not kind in the chat, and every time I tried to compensate because I was so nervous, there was one woman in the Zoom, and she would not let me fail. And she was like, "You're awesome. Don't listen to them. You're doing a great job." And I think about her, and I owe so much of my confidence building in that scenario to her. But it wasn't until I started to reflect, I was like, oh my God, how am I ever going to do this? Right. Because it was so personal. But she was my cheerleader. And I was like, I do this because I get to be other people's cheerleaders. And so I did take time to reflect. I do a lot of professional development in my day-to-day career. I know about best practices of helping adults learn. And so I pulled back. I honed my story. I put in my best practices. I structured it in the way I would structure it for work. And it's much better now, right? Like I do my 10 minutes, then they get 15 minutes in small groups as opposed to my rambling. And so that's really, I think the learning is in the reflecting and the processing, not in the doing. And so it's always important for me to reflect back.
Kudos to you for being so brave and so vulnerable and sharing your story. It is nerve-wracking when you share your story for the first time. I remember when I did it to my mentor, and I was just like completely honest. And afterwards, I was like, did I just say all that? And then it was the test, like, okay, what's going to happen after this? Am I going to hear from her? Or is she going to disappear? Or is she going to embrace it? Like, what's going to happen? So yeah, kudos to you. Sandy.
Yeah, the story that came to mind for that question is just when a really good friend of mine in our group had a bipolar crisis, and I just was so over my head. I didn't know what to do, and he ran away from me physically, and I couldn't convince him that I was trying to help. And it was a very emotional time. I was afraid for him. I was afraid for his life. I was afraid for his future. And that was really hard to get over, because I had a sense of personal responsibility and emotional responsibility to try and help. And I felt like I was just failing. So that was really hard to overcome. I had to talk a lot with my therapist, with our mutual friends, and to just get to the point where I realized I did the best I could.
And, kudos to you as well, right? For being selfless and being there and being supportive for your friend, but also having that awareness, to know that it was time for you to step back and take care of yourself, which is another big thing. Okay, I am going to jump into the Q&A because we have a lot of questions. So, first question. Marilyn asked, what happens if you do not have a support system?
Join a group. There's so many groups on Meetup. There's groups. TheMighty.com is a great group that you can search by diagnosis, physical and mental health diagnosis, and just find people. And they start as strangers maybe, but they become friends. You will find people who get you, who can speak the language. And there's also 7 Cups of Tea, which is an app where it's like a warm line, not a hotline. So if you just need someone to talk to, there are people on the other side of the online app. And there's even a chat bot, Wysa, WYSA, and it's a chatbot mental health penguin that you can talk to 24/7 and just get support that way. But you're not alone. You'll find people if you look for them. But you do have to put yourself out there and be vulnerable and be honest and authentic. But you'll find someone.
Lara, would you like to share anything?
I completely agree, and I'm grateful for these new resources from you, Sandy. Thank you for sharing.
So there's another question. Oops, and I just closed it. Sorry. There's another question. Pauline asked, I love the concept of investing in oneself. How do you do that?
Yeah, so I would say the first thing is, if you've been through trauma, you need a trauma therapist, right? Like, that's the first thing. You have to learn that you are not your experiences. and that you couldn't have stopped, prevented, or changed them from happening to you, right? You are not guilty of those things, and that your experiences speak more about the other person and what they chose to do than you're going through it. So I would say that's the first thing. The second thing is learning your value, right? I talked at the very beginning that having a balance between empathy and narcissistic traits is where you know you're healthy. And I think for a lot of us, we lose track of our own self-value. And if you don't know your self-value, ask somebody you respect. What do they respect about you? And then own it, because it's true.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of self-help books and teachers. There's so many personal development teachers out there. And if you find someone that you kind of resonate with and who kind of speaks to your heart, you can invest in books and tapes and classes and their courses. There's so much out there.
Sorry for the noise in the background.
Sure.
New York streets.
Also self-care. If you can find something that will make you more comfortable, more authentic, more yourself, buy it. If you can afford it, buy it.
Yeah.
Buy it, borrow it, try it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I can't help but add my 2 cents here. I mean, I feel like there's so many ways that you can invest in yourself, and getting yourself a therapist, right? Having alone time with yourself, having time to journal and getting to know yourself, there's so much that you can do in terms of getting to know yourself, right? And having that awareness. For me, a lot of it was having the awareness to know when I was going to have an episode. And it's helped because, once I knew that was going to happen, or I kind of felt myself slipping and getting into one, I immediately knew what I had to do, right? Like, I had the resources, and it was because I took that time to invest in myself and learn about myself and have that awareness and learn what the triggers were and what the patterns looked like, so that when that did happen, the episode would still happen, but would last less time than it had in the past, and it wouldn't be as severe as it was in the past. Okay, we have time for one more question because I know that Lara has to go. We have one more question. So what are some helpful stepping stones to dealing with PTSD aspect of having been in an abusive relationship? Lara, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, so I think number one is not just therapy, but therapy with somebody who specializes in trauma, right? And so two therapies I am aware of are somatic experience as well as EMDR. They're both highly accredited for helping people along their healing journey. And second thing just slipped my mind, so I'm going to turn it over to Sandy and see if it comes back.
Mm-hmm. Havening is one that I've heard of recently. That's for PTSD. That's really great. And EFT, or tapping technique, also very good for anxiety, thought, and PTSD trauma.
Thank you both. I know that you have to go, but I just wanted to say a lot of folks are asking about your groups. They'd like to join your groups. I don't know if that's possible. We can definitely share the links to your groups with the people that are on here, if y'all are open to it. But yeah, people are asking about your groups, or if you can refer them to a different group, that would also be great.
Yeah, so in terms of Meetup, you are all welcome to send membership. Again, as I said, I really take my 3 questions very seriously. I also spearhead a Facebook group called Beyond Narcissistic Abuse, and you're welcome to join that too.
Great. And if you go to dbsalliance.org, you can find all the different chapters that are nationwide and international. Find some groups near you.
Thank you both so much for joining today's event. Thank you for participating in today's event and being vulnerable and sharing your experiences. I really, really enjoyed listening to you. I mean, this is such an important topic and such a powerful conversation. So I really appreciate you both taking the time to come on here and talk about it with us. Before we go, I do want to share 2 more slides. So Lara, I know that you have to go.
I do. I have to go talk to some teachers about next year. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Okay, so we talked a lot about mental health support, and some of you asked about groups. If there's anyone on here that would like to be an organizer, that was inspired by Sandy's or Lara's story and would like to be an organizer, we are offering, we have a promotion where you get 50% off your first subscription if you go to meetupsavings.com. And secondly, I would like to ask that you pull out your phone at this time and scan the QR code so that you can subscribe to our podcast, Keep Connected with David Siegel. We launched an episode yesterday, How to Have a Meaningful Life with Smiley Pozwalski, which I also feel goes hand in hand with the conversation that we had today. If you don't want to pull out your phone or you can't scan the QR code, don't worry. You can also subscribe on meetuppodcast.com. And as we mentioned before, this event was recorded, so we will be sharing a recording and a recap of this event on our blog, meetup.com/blog, at some time next week. So thank you everyone for joining today's event, and thank you so much, Sandy, for being a part of this conversation. Have a great day, all.
Thank you.
Bye.